Go on. Sorry.
I agree with that. I think what's going to happen is, right now we're kind of early in adoption. Everyone's moving towards the UDI. And, as you can see with all technology, right now there's a lot of cost to implement. The big players are doing that. They're working through it. I think as the technology becomes more mature, it becomes a lot more accessible to more and more people, it becomes more standard. And I think it's important today to drive that standard practice, right? The standard practice will enable those common, processes and technology features.
Okay. So I've split this a little bit. So that's the general commentary there, and the question has been split into three pieces to try and just get a little bit more out of the responses. So what I want to try and understand is where the impact sits for different stakeholders within the chain. So how do you think these standards have an impact for manufacturers and distributors?
Well, for us as a device manufacturer, I think we're probably the best user of the GS1 standards. We use it in our ERP system. We use it to number products. We use it in our factories to track products. We use it in our distribution centers. We have it in our shipping documents and our systems. When you look at not track and trace in the pharmaceutical sense, but being able to understand what went where, I think we do a very, very effective job of using data standards to drive all the right efficiencies and safe practices. I think that distributors can sometimes use this, and less than we would hope, but I think there are some good examples of distributors who have used the data standards incredibly well. I think that's probably a minority, but I think that there are some distributors that have really great practices in this area.
The distributors' challenge is always consistency. If they're getting consistency from all the suppliers, then it makes it a lot easier. For us, what we did is when we consider data standards, well, what can we do with this? Are we doing data standards just for the sake of doing data standards? Are we doing data standards to help everyone, including us? We took a look at it as, okay, we're putting barcodes on our products. What do we do with it? How do we improve our process with it? So we adapted those processes and equipment and all. We purchased it. We made the investment, and it's paid off for us. But in doing so, we had to drive consistency within our supply chain. So we had to push our manufacturing plant to make sure they provided what we needed to propel the product, and follow that consistent process within BD. So, as it goes to the distributors, now they have a bigger pool of product that's coming in. Hopefully everything they see from BD, and I think the general consensus from the field is that they see a lot of consistency with our product, and I think it's driven because we're using it, we're the first ones to see if there's any issues.
Okay. So I guess what leads on from that, and where you say issues and so on, is the other stakeholder group is the regulators themselves. I mean, how do you think standards for identification help, or how the regulators see them? I suppose where the humanitarian aid delivery is, I guess the question would probably be steered towards regulators in those countries, more specifically than the home country regulator, as it were.
I think generally the regulators should get tremendous value from the consistent identification of products, right? I don't think we've yet seen that. We've not really seen that come to fruition yet. But if you look at U.S. FDA, I think they're on the right path. I think that they're beginning to make sense of it. We've not seen. I don't think we've realized it yet, but regardless if it's U.S. FDA or any regulator, I think there is just tremendous value in being able to identify precisely what the product is. And when you look at recalls, being able to use a consistent language for recalls, and even when you look at just scrutinizing data or product complaints, when you have all device manufacturers speaking a common language, I think that there is just tremendous potential benefits.
You're talking globally, right?
Yeah, I think regardless of the regulator, right, you can see how this would make sense. device is or isn't, and who makes it. And I think without data standards, I think it becomes incredibly difficult for the regulators to look across an industry and make sense of it all.
And the other stakeholder group is, which I think you've mentioned. This is not necessarily your position with the organisation, but how do you think it affects the care and aid providers themselves to be able to have standards, or indeed if standards aren't there?
I think it could help them. I don't know what their processes are today. I don't know if it's something they even look at, or if they're attempting to scan or make sense of device identifiers. I just don't know enough about them, but seemingly it would give them the same sort of benefits that a regulator or distributor or healthcare provider could get.
You would think the best place for them to start is really their central distribution. Right? That is the product from there.
Very receiving.
And then eventually, as the technology starts to refine and use it out in the field.
That's cool. Okay, so here's a slightly different question, and it might take. This is our final main question, and this is really the difficult one, I guess. Overall, is what are the impacts of identifying products by their generic product type rather than by individual manufacturers' naming or coding?
I just think when you strip away a common language, and if you look at device classification, whether it's GMDN, no matter what system it is, UNSPSE, fill the blanks. There's 20 of them out there that classify products. I think when you can look at items and make sense across the industry, regardless of manufacturer, I think that helps. And then when you can describe products or sort them numerically, I think that just makes further sense, right? I mean, it's something that, regardless of supply chain, this is something that needs to be done, right? We do it for our own purposes internally. Even though we make all these products, we have a precise way of numbering them and organizing them and tracking them. We recognize how difficult it is. I think that by using data standards, you can just make it attainable to make sense of all these products. Without that, I don't know how you do it. It's just too difficult to sort it out.
Yeah, I agree. How do you, it becomes a huge obstacle. Now you have to, how do you, to extend the product to different regions, now you have to figure out the code. What's the different code to enter that market, get to sell in that market. So it really drives, different challenges for us. So, if we can come up with one common approach globally, a lot of the major medical device companies are global companies. So, and it's a little different than, we don't really have a huge volume, let's say that let's say a pharmaceutical company might have. So, we try to leverage, part of our efficiency comes by trying to leverage a global product and make it, one factory makes, a world supply. So, rather than having all this regional, different regional companies. So, the data standards would be a common approach globally would be a huge benefit.
Well, that's cool. So how do you think this would influence a manufacturer's decision or decision-making process to place a product on the market?
Now, is this specifically for humanitarian aid or just generally?
Yeah. So the nature of the question is if more generic coding rather than more specific coding. So let's say let's pick up one of the standards you mentioned. Let's say UNSPSC, for example. If that became a in the humanitarian sector, a primary way of identifying a 20mm syringe, for argument's sake, what would the manufacturer think about that?